On the evening of January 30th, 2024, the digital landscape of YouTube was interrupted by an upload that would permanently scar the psyche of everyone unfortunate enough to view it. In the quiet, unassuming suburb of Levittown, Pennsylvania, a tragedy had unfolded behind the closed doors of a modest two-story home. But unlike most domestic horrors that remain hidden in police files, this one was broadcast to the world. A 32-year-old man sat in front of a webcam, his demeanor eerily calm, his voice steady, delivering a political manifesto that spiraled into absolute madness. For the first 14 minutes, it appeared to be nothing more than the rambling delusions of a conspiracy theorist, a man angry at the government, angry at society, and lost in his own echo chamber. But then, the video shifted from a rant to a crime scene. The man on the screen, Justin Mohn, did not just speak of violence. He displayed the gruesome trophy of his patricide. He lifted a plastic bag into the frame, revealing the severed head of his own father, Michael Mohn, a 68-year-old federal employee who had supported him, housed him, and fed him. This was not a movie. This was not a dark web rumor. This was a son, looking into the lens of a camera and declaring war on reality itself. To understand how a college graduate, a musician, and an author could descend into such a profound abyss of inhumanity, we have to look beyond the 14 minutes of horror. We have to rewind the clock and examine the slow, corrosive decay of a mind that convinced itself that murder was not a crime, but a patriotic duty. This is the story of a man who wanted to be a messiah, but became a monster. Levittown is often cited as the archetype of the American suburb, a place built on the promise of stability, family, and the quiet pursuit of happiness. It is a place where neighbors know each other, where lawns are manicured, and where the most exciting event of the week might be a local high school football game. The Mohn family lived on Upper Orchard Drive, a street that embodied this peaceful existence. Michael Mohn was a pillar of his household, a dedicated employee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a job that required diligence, patriotism, and a commitment to public service. His wife, Denise, worked hard to maintain their home. They were, by all accounts, a normal, loving couple looking forward to their retirement years. But inside their home lived a source of constant tension, a volatility that had been brewing for over a decade. Their adult son, Justin, had returned to the nest, not as a temporary stopgap, but as a permanent, resentful dependent. Justin was not an uneducated man. He had graduated from Pennsylvania State University in 2014 with a degree in agribusiness management. On paper, he had the tools to succeed, to build a life, to contribute to society. But the reality of his postgraduate life did not match the grandeur of his expectations. He struggled to hold down a job, moving from one short-term employment to another, never finding a foothold in the corporate world he so despised. As the years passed, Justin's inability to launch his career transformed into a deep, festering bitterness. He did not blame himself. He did not look inward for faults or areas of improvement. Instead, he looked outward, projecting his failures onto the systems that governed his life. He became convinced that he was a genius, an intellectual superior who was being actively suppressed by a shadowy conspiracy. This narcissism was evident in his creative endeavors. He self-published books and released music albums on Spotify, works that he believed were masterpieces but were largely ignored by the public. In his writing, he often cast himself as a revolutionary figure, a lone wolf fighting against a corrupt world. The silence from the world, the lack of acclaim, and the mounting student loan debt only fueled his paranoia. He began to see himself as a victim of affirmative action, filing lawsuits against the federal government, claiming that his status as an educated white man was the reason for his unemployment. The courts dismissed his claims as frivolous, lacking any legal standing or evidence. To Justin, These dismissals were not legal defeats. They were proof. Proof that the system was rigged. Proof that the government was his enemy. And the face of that government, the closest representation of the federal authority he despised, was sleeping in the bedroom down the hall. His father, Michael. The tension in the Mohn household must have been suffocating. Michael, the provider, the man who paid the bills and put food on the table, was a daily reminder of Justin's own inadequacies. But in Justin's twisted narrative, Michael was not a provider. He was a collaborator. By working for the Army Corps of Engineers, Michael was, in Justin's eyes, a traitor to the nation, a cog in the machine that was destroying America. This delusion grew stronger, fed by hours spent in the dark corners of the internet, consuming and regurgitating extreme anti-government rhetoric. By January 2024, Justin was no longer living in reality. He had constructed a world where he was the commander of a non-existent army, Mohn's Militia, and his destiny was to initiate a violent revolution. He purchased a Sig Sauer 9mm pistol. He bought a machete. He waited. The morning of January 30th began like any other. Denise Mohn left the house early, perhaps heading to work or run errands, leaving the two men alone. We may never know the exact conversation that transpired, or if there were any words spoken at all. Perhaps Michael was drinking his coffee or watching TV, unaware that the person he had raised, the boy he had taught to ride a bike, was standing behind him with a loaded weapon. The violence that followed was methodical and savage. Justin shot his father in the head. But the rage did not end with the pull of the trigger. Driven by a desire to send a message, to shock the world into paying attention to him, Justin took the machete and a kitchen knife and committed the unthinkable act of decapitation. The brutality required to perform such an act on one's own father suggests a complete detachment from humanity, a psychopathic break where the victim is no longer a person, but a symbol to be destroyed. After the murder, Justin did not flee immediately. He did not panic. He had work to do. He placed his father's head in a clear plastic cooking pot, and later a plastic bag. He set up his camera in his bedroom, ensuring the lighting and the angle were correct. He sat down, composed himself, and hit record. The video, titled Mohn's Militia, Call to Arms for American Patriots, began with a script he had likely rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. He spoke of woke mobs, of the destruction of the economy, of the evils of the federal government. It was a bingo card of extremist buzzwords. Then, at the 14:30 mark, he lifted the severed head. He held it up for the camera, his face devoid of sorrow, and declared, "This is the head of Mike Mohn, a federal employee of over 20 years, and my father. He is now in hell for eternity as a traitor to his country." The image was grotesque, a nightmare manifested in high definition. He went on to place a bounty on the heads of other federal officials, calling for violence against the FBI, the IRS, and the judiciary. He ranted against the Biden administration, against immigrants, against the LGBTQ community. It was a manifesto of hate, sealed in blood. Justin uploaded the video to YouTube. He left the house, taking his father's Toyota Corolla. He did not drive aimlessly. He had a destination. He drove nearly 100 miles away to Fort Indiantown Gap, a National Guard training center. His plan, as later revealed by prosecutors, was as delusional as his crime. He believed that if he showed up at the military base, he could mobilize the National Guard to join his revolution. He thought that by displaying the courage of killing his own father, the soldiers would recognize him as their leader and march on Washington. This was the depth of his insanity. He truly believed the world would applaud his parricide. Back in Levittown, the horror was being discovered. Denise Mohn returned home around 7 p.m. She noticed her husband's car was missing. She walked into the house and found a scene that no human being should ever have to witness. The immense trauma of that moment is indescribable. She called the police, her voice likely trembling with shock. Officers from the Middletown Township Police Department arrived within minutes. They found the headless body in the downstairs bathroom. They found the head in a cooking pot in the bedroom. They found the bloody gloves, the machete in the bathtub, and the computer still warm from the upload. By this time, the video had been circulating for hours. YouTube's moderation systems eventually flagged and removed it, but not before it had been viewed thousands of times. Not before it had been ripped and shared on darker forums. Not before the image of Michael Mohn's remains had been burned into the retinas of strangers. The manhunt was swift. Police pinged Justin's cell phone. They tracked him to the area near Fort Indiantown Gap. Around 9 p.m., officers located the Toyota Corolla parked outside the base.
Justin had abandoned the car and was attempting to scale the perimeter fence of the military installation.
He was wearing a windbreaker and carrying a loaded weapon. He was not met with a legion of followers ready to revolt. He was met by the Pennsylvania State Police and local authorities. The body cam footage of the arrest shows a man who seemed confused that his grand plan hadn't worked. He was taken into custody without a firefight. The revolution was over before it began. In the interrogation room and in the subsequent court proceedings, Justin showed little remorse. He maintained his delusions, framing his actions as political necessity. However, the legal system saw it differently. There was no glory, no revolution, only a cold-blooded, first-degree murder. The prosecutors painted a picture of a man who was fully aware of his actions, a man who plotted, executed, and capitalized on the death of his father for internet clout and political grandstanding. The defense could offer little to counter the overwhelming evidence: the video confession, the DNA, the weapon, the flight from the scene. In December 2025, the gavel finally came down. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Justin Mohn was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and possession of an instrument of crime. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no more YouTube videos, no more manifestos, no more delusional music albums. Just 4 walls and the silence of a life wasted. The tragedy of the Mohn family is a grim reflection of the modern age. It is a story about the dangers of online radicalization, where echo chambers can amplify grievances until they distort reality. It is a story about the failure to recognize the warning signs of severe mental decline in adult children living at home. But mostly, it is a story about the terrifying fragility of the human bond. Michael Mohn spent his life protecting his country and providing for his son, only to be consumed by the very hatred his son nurtured in the dark. As we scroll through our feeds, looking for the next piece of entertainment, we must remember that behind every pixelated thumbnail of a true crime story, there are real lives, real pain, and real blood. The case of Justin Mohn forces us to question not just the sanity of one man, but the nature of the digital world that gave him a platform. He wanted the world to see his father's death, and sadly, because of the internet, we did. The true horror isn't just that he did it. It's that he thought we would cheer him on.